Welcome back to Navigate's People First podcast. If you're used to tuning into our podcast, you'll know that you usually hear from our hosts, Jeremy and Troy. Well, I'm usually the one behind the camera making the magic happen. In the spirit of the holiday season, we're switching things up and bringing you a conversation from the vault. I'm Kinzy Gillespie, brand experience specialist here at Navigate, and about 6 months ago, I had the opportunity to sit down with Miss Iowa as she was preparing to hand over her title. Our conversation centered around the power of doing good and making a difference in our communities. Although this conversation is from earlier this year, its messages are timeless. Miss Iowa shared inspirational stories and practical ways we can all make an impact, no matter how small. And with this episode releasing on Thanksgiving Day, there's no better time than now to share it with you. We hope this episode leaves you feeling inspired and ready to go out and spark positivity within your own community. In the spirit of gratitude, we want to say thank you to all of our amazing listeners. We appreciate you taking the time and tuning in. Now put on your fanciest sweatpants, make the long commute to the nearest couch, and enjoy this heartwarming conversation with the one and only Alysa Goethe. I'm thrilled to introduce you to today's guest, Alysa Goethe. Alysa was crowned Miss Iowa in June of 2023. She's here on the podcast today to discuss the power of having a platform and using your voice for good. Alysa was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes at age 11, and she's been a fierce advocate for diabetes research ever since. We're here to talk about using your platform for good, mentoring others, and the power we all have to make a change. Before we dive in, I'm just going to rapid fire a few questions that you didn't have ahead of time. So
okay.
Nothing too wild, but at Navigate, we have what we call our Navigate conversation cards. So these were kind of born out of necessity that we saw, an opportunity that we saw to help people engage in conversation with one another. So think of that like an icebreaker, or just if you're starting a meeting, you're meeting somebody new and you have no idea what to talk about. These were born out of that. So if you would like some conversation cards, feel free to hit us up and we would love to send you some in the mail. So diving right in. You ready?
Ooh, I think so.
Okay. Ooh, this kind of coincides with your pageant world here.
Okay.
Do you have any hidden talents?
Oh gosh. Any hidden talents? Not really. I feel like all my talents are utilized or on display. I can share a fun fact that's a lack of a talent. I never learned how to ride a bike. So that's my surprising lack of talent that I will share with everyone. I'm outing myself on your podcast right now.
I love this, though. Are there plans in your future to learn how to ride a bike?
No,
just no.
In all honesty, every time I tell people, they're like, I'll be the one to teach you. And I said, are you really going to be, though? It's never worked. So if I can drive a car, I think I'm fine.
Yeah, you can get where you need to be.
Exactly.
No problem.
Exactly.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. All right, next one. What is the most interesting book you've read recently?
Oh, man. I'm a big sucker for romance books.
Okay.
And I recently read a book called Book Lovers by Emily Henry. And I would highly recommend that to anyone who likes to read, but is maybe in a reading slump, because I tore through that in like 2 days.
Yeah.
So highly recommend.
I also read that book and love it very, very much.
So good.
Big Emily Henry fan over here. Easy reads. All right. So we are heavy in the throes of baseball season. I'm a mom of 3 and my son is an 11-year-old travel baseball. So players and teammates, they have their walk-up song, the thing that they go to the plate with. So we're curious, what is your walk-up song?
I actually was just asked this last week, so I'm ready with an answer. I love to sing musical theater. I grew up in theater, and so I would do some sort of rendition of Defying Gravity from Wicked. But the big part of the song, if anyone knows what I'm talking about, you know.
Yeah.
But I would love to do some sort of like pop rock version, because I also really love, guitars, and I love going to concerts and modern music. So maybe a mix of both, but definitely Defying Gravity.
I love that. So if you're out doing karaoke, are you defying gravity?
Oh, I can't sing that song, but I will walk up to that song. It's a little out of my range, I gotta say.
Okay.
I'll leave that to Idina Menzel.
Yes, she did do it best. I don't think anyone's ever topping that, but that's a great choice. I love that. If you could go back in time, what is one piece of advice you'd give to your younger self?
Oh man, I always get emotional when I talk about this. I'm going to try not to cry on the podcast. Advice I would give to 11-year-old Alysa, who was just diagnosed with diabetes, this is who I always think of when I'm asked this question. I would tell her to not be afraid and that she can still accomplish all the things she wants to in life. Because I was so afraid that all of the goals I had set for myself, all of the dreams I wanted to accomplish were suddenly vanishing before my eyes. And it was because of all the people that were the naysayers telling me I couldn't, or my own thoughts thinking my diabetes was a hindrance rather than a motivating factor to achieve all of those incredible goals and dreams that I have. So letting her know that it's not going to get in her way and that she should still shoot for the stars is what I would tell her.
That's amazing. And look, you didn't cry.
I didn't cry. I made it.
Good job. We always joke around here that I am the crier of our team because I get emotional over every little thing.
Yep.
It can be a cute puppy. It can be a super emotional moment, but
I call it my daily cry. I cry at least at some point almost every day. And it could be over literally nothing. There's a time where my parents were like, "Why are you crying?" I was like, "I don't know. I just needed to."
Yeah.
So we all need to cry sometimes. It's okay.
Get it out there.
Yeah.
I 100% agree. I always feel better. My eyes don't necessarily, but I always feel better after the fact. So, all right, let's do one more here. And what are your hopes for the future of our community?
Oh my gosh, this feels like a pageant question.
That's a heavy hitter. I know. We've got everything from like, do you prefer donuts or bagels to what do you see for the future of your community? So,
I mean, to be honest, that is what a pageant interview is like. I remember being asked if you could be a crayon, what color would you be and why? And then also, what is our state motto and what does it mean? So, I mean, similar vibe here. So I'm pretty prepared. I would love for the Des Moines metro area to just continue to see it developing because we have grown so much. Even since I've been here, I moved here in 2019 when I went to Drake University, and seeing how much it's developed, not just in the Drake neighborhood, but all across in the suburbs, the developing areas. It's been really amazing to see. And I know a lot of young professionals are starting to come here. So as a young professional myself, I would love to see it continue to flourish and more people realize that Iowa's the place to be. It's a beautiful place.
It is. And I love it. Thank you. What a great answer. All right. So we did a high level, who is Alysa, but I would love to hear in your own words a little bit more about you.
Well, my name is Alysa Goethe. I was crowned Miss Iowa last June, like you said. And I've been competing in the Miss America program for 14 years now, which is crazy to think about. I started when I was 10 years old. And I'm a musician. That's what initially drew me to the competition. I've been singing since I could talk pretty much, which probably drove my parents crazy. So I'm a vocalist. I play 8 different instruments. I went to school for music. I was a music teacher for a little bit. And now full time, I do diabetes advocacy with Iowa Diabetes, which has been really rewarding. And that's what's been my platform as Miss Iowa. So that's just me in a nutshell, I guess.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. You were diagnosed with diabetes at age 11. Can you kind of walk us through what that was like for you, what it was like to receive the diagnosis, especially at such a young age, and kind of the thoughts, emotions, feelings around that diagnosis?
Oh, absolutely. It was tough. It was my very first week of middle school, the first Monday of middle school. I was 11. I had no idea what was really happening, but I knew in an instant my life was changing. And I vividly remember being in the doctor's office, just crying to my mom because I felt already so different. And unfortunately, I was bullied because of my diabetes. I had people who were not very kind or accommodating, even teachers. And overall, I felt really, really lonely, even though in those initial moments. I was fortunate, though, that my dad was diagnosed with type 1 at 13. So he was there to kind of guide me. But it didn't change the fact that I was the only person in my graduating class to have diabetes from when I was diagnosed up until I graduated high school. So I was still very much alone, and I could feel that from the beginning. But there was also that sense of optimism where I'm a very headstrong person. And I thought, well, I'm going to prove myself right, and I'm going to prove others wrong. And so even in the hospital room, I had turned to my mom and said, I don't want other people to feel how I feel right now. I want to help people, especially people with diabetes. So it was this weird sense of emotions where it felt like my life was turning completely upside down, but I was trying to turn it back the other way. And throughout the years, it's been a struggle, but at the same time, it's been incredibly empowering to realize that I'm able to take my life in control and take back my life, even when it felt like it was being ripped away.
That's amazing. What a strong sense of self and awareness and emotion to be able to play into at such a young age. Like I know that a lot of kids at that age don't have that mentality. So
Yeah.
that's great.
Well, thank you. I've always been stubborn and headstrong. I mean, you can ask my parents, they would agree. But it has served me well living with diabetes. But I also think diabetes makes you that way, because so many times I hear people who will say, when they see me give myself a shot, they'll say, "Oh, I could never do that." But the reality is you could, because you have to.
Exactly.
And it's things like that that diabetes makes you do, and makes you become into this person who is strong, who is resilient, who's willing to persevere in the face of adversity, because it's something you have to do.
Yeah. Did you enter into the pageant world before or after your diagnosis?
Before. It was a year before.
Okay.
So I was already competing when I was 10. And then that next year was when I was diagnosed. And it was actually a really cool moment, because I was able to use the outlet of service within the Miss America program to not only advocate for diabetes, but to work through my grief that I was feeling. And honestly, I think that's why I felt so empowered, knowing I could make a difference with this platform that I already had.
Yeah.
Because I don't know what would have happened if I didn't have it. So I'm very grateful that I was able to use it as an escape and as a way to help others, to then in turn help myself.
Yeah. Explain a little bit more. You mentioned outlet of service. What does that entail?
So everyone who competes in the Miss America program, even at the local level, has what we call a community service initiative, which basically means it's a cause that you promote throughout the year. So you choose one cause that you really, really care about. I don't even remember what mine was to start with. I think it was just general volunteerism or something, which some people still do, and that's amazing. Some people might do specific illnesses, like mine obviously turned into diabetes. Some people do mental health. I know someone did organ donation. There's a variety of things you can choose from, really just a cause that you champion. And so having that outlet where I could choose something that I was promoting, it was a no-brainer for me to suddenly make this diabetes now, because it already was impacting my life so deeply and was becoming deeply embedded in my life. And I figured, what better way to serve than through this platform that I now have? And it just worked out perfectly, I think, with the timing. And I'm, again, so grateful for that.
That's great. I'm glad that you had that outlet and that platform and were able to work through that grief a little bit. Going back to your diagnosis, what was that like, or how did you find out? Were you getting tested regularly because you said you had a history of it in your family, or was there a moment that something happened that you ended up with the diagnosis?
We were fortunate to catch mine very early. And I do think it's because my dad has it, but also my grandmother on my mom's side has it. So my mom is the wife, daughter, and mother now of people with type 1 diabetes. So she was very familiar with what it was and what the signs and symptoms were. And so she was always on the lookout, because even before they had kids, they asked their doctors, what is the likelihood of having a child with type 1 diabetes if we're getting it from both sides? And they told them it went from 1% to 2%. Now, I'm sure that data has changed since it's been 27, my brother's 27 years since they asked that question. But they always knew it was a possibility. So they were always looking for the symptoms. For a while, they thought my brother had it when he was younger, but a lot of the symptoms reflect puberty, like frequent thirst, frequent hunger, weight loss. And I was exhibiting some of those. But again, I was in middle school. That's pretty common for someone who's growing. And it wasn't until I had a stomach ache in the middle of the night that, for some reason, on a whim, my mom said, let's check your blood sugar. So we grabbed the meter, checked it. It was above 200. And that's not normal. Normal, for people who don't know, is between 80 and 120 for people who don't have diabetes. So 200 is pretty elevated. And of course, I started freaking out because I thought, oh, I have diabetes. I don't want to have diabetes. And my mom calmly said, well, go to the doctor tomorrow. You'll get tested. Maybe you don't have it. Maybe you're just sick and it's making your blood sugar higher. I think that was just a coping strategy for both of us. And we went to the doctor the next day. We did a urine test. There were ketones, which means too much sugar. And they sent me to Iowa City, where I stayed for 3 days and learned how to live with diabetes. So it was pretty fast. And that's why it kind of felt like my world was just turned upside down, because one day I was what I thought to be a perfectly normal 6th grader and now have to live this completely new lifestyle at such a young age.
Absolutely. You went back to school after that, and you mentioned that there were some bullying and people that just maybe didn't understand what was going on. What was that like for you?
It was very hard because I was trying to be optimistic, And I think that's always just how I am. I try to be optimistic when things don't necessarily go my way. And again, with diabetes, you have to be optimistic or you're not going to survive this. And it was kind of a harsh reality check when people were very unkind to me. I remember specifically a moment I was trying to be the little advocate go-getter right away, where I was giving a little speech in my homeroom as a sixth grader about what diabetes was, why I might have to leave early sometimes, and things like that. And when we left the room, one of the boys in the class was walking next to me and then went to the clear other side of the hallway and said, "I don't want to catch what you have."
Ugh.
And at that age, you probably know it's not contagious, and it was just to be rude. And I do think a lot of it at that young age stems from fear, knowing it could happen to anyone at any time.
Yeah.
But it doesn't make it okay. I can understand the action, but I don't have to excuse it. And so that was really hard to deal with because then I felt othered right away, my first day back. And so for a long time, I actually tried to hide my diabetes from people. I wouldn't tell people that I had it. I went for a long time without wearing a continuous glucose monitor, which now I don't know how I lived without it. It is so helpful. But I was so ashamed of it for so long. Even in high school, there was someone who saw me giving myself a shot and said, "Do you have to do that here?" So things like that made me feel like I was less than as well as different. But I always reminded myself that, again, I needed to prove myself right and to prove them wrong. And I feel like now I can say, well, I'm Miss Iowa. So
Absolutely.
I can now remind myself of that. The first diabetic Miss Iowa, to be exact.
That's incredible. So for some of today's youth that maybe is feeling othered or like they're the outlier or is experiencing some of these similar bullying experiences, what advice would you give to them in this moment?
Bullying is so hard. And nowadays it happens a lot behind a screen, unfortunately, and it's really hard to monitor or see what's really happening. But my advice is to stick to your guns, to know what you stand for, to know who you are inside and out. Because once I believed in myself and knew what I was capable of, it felt like nothing could stop me. I didn't believe what they were saying anymore about me or to my face even.
Mm-hmm.
So if you can just stand up for what you believe in and understand that there might be people who aren't in your corner, but there definitely are people who will stand by you. So finding those people, finding your tribe who are there to support you, kind of make the naysayers kind of, melt away.
Yeah. Okay. So you've been in the pageant world for a long time. 15
Yes.
years is what you said?
14.
14 years. All right. So what inspired you to get into the world of pageantry?
I, again, have always loved to sing. And I saw my cousin compete when I was 10 in a local competition. And I turned to my mom and I said, "Oh, I want to do that. I want to sing for people," because I was so enamored by the talent phase of competition. I loved it. And my mom said, "Really? Why?" Because I was a huge tomboy, believe it or not. I hated makeup. I hated my hair done. I didn't even like wearing shoes. And I definitely did not like wearing dresses unless it was to church on Sundays. So it made no sense why I would want to do a pageant. But I just wanted to sing for people. I wanted that chance to be on stage and do what I love. So I begged and begged my mom. She said no. And the reason was she did not want me to turn into toddlers and tiaras, if you remember that show.
Absolutely.
She thought all the girls would be snotty with the fake teeth and the fake hair, the fake tanner, everything that I was very adamant against. And basically, I wore her down enough until she said, "Fine, you'll do one, you'll lose, and you'll get it out of your system. You'll never do one again." I won. I kind of forgot that you could win. I really thought it was just for fun until they called my name. I said, "Oh yeah, this is a part of it." And I just had an amazing year where I got to do a lot of service. I did a lot of events, a lot of performing, and I fell in love. And then that next year, before I competed for another title, I was diagnosed with diabetes, and that love really grew because I now had that outlet of service, like I had mentioned earlier, that I could use to help others, help myself, and still get to do all the fun things that I had experienced the year before.
That's great. What was your first title?
It was Junior Miss Scott County. So I'm originally from Bettendorf, Iowa, in the Quad Cities. And then I moved here to the Des Moines area when I went to Drake. So I represented my hometown, and it was so much fun.
And what is the path after that? So you got your first title, and then what is the path to Miss Iowa?
Yes. We have different age divisions. So there's Little Miss, Junior Miss, Teen, and then Miss. Okay. So I started in the Junior Miss. That's about 10 to 12 range. And the way it works for all the age divisions is you compete at the local level first. And if you win that local title, competing in all the different phases and having that community service initiative, you then qualify as a local title holder for the state competition. So as Junior Miss Scott County, I competed for Junior Miss Iowa. Now, I did not win, did not even come close, I don't think. But I still got to compete at the state level, and you still earn prize money. So especially for Miss and Teen, you earn scholarships, whether you are dead last or you are the winner. And so as Miss Iowa, I won about $12,000 in scholarship in one night that I was able to put towards my student loans and then in the future a master's degree, which is amazing. And after Miss Iowa or Miss Iowa's Teen, you go to the big national stage and you go to Miss America.
There you go.
Yeah.
So that's next.
Well, I already competed. So my year's almost done. I crowned the next Miss Iowa in about 3 weeks, which is crazy. So I competed at Miss America in January in Orlando. So when y'all got all that snow, I was in Florida, which was so nice. It was funny. Miss Florida, who's a dear friend of mine, was complaining about how cold it was while we were there. It was 55 degrees.
Okay.
And I said, you should see what we're getting back home when it was negative 15.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was an amazing experience. Honestly, the goal was always Miss Iowa. So to even be at Miss America was just, I have no words. It was so amazing. I met people from all 50 states and Washington, D.C. I got to represent Iowa and felt like I was a celebrity a little bit. It was so amazing. I can't even recap it. I am so blessed that I got to do that and got to represent our incredible state.
That is so cool. So remind me again when you passed the crown?
June 15th is the official day. So about 3 weeks from tomorrow. Or sorry, not tomorrow, from Saturday.
Okay.
So it's coming up.
And how are you feeling about that?
It's bittersweet. That's been the big question I've been getting the past couple of weeks. It's bittersweet for sure, but it is a very long year. This is a full-time job for the year where you travel the state. I've traveled, close to 45,000 miles this year. I've been to 75 counties, 8 different states in Washington, D.C. I've stayed busy probably every day this year. So I will be relieved to pass it on, but at the same time, it'll be bittersweet because I'll always look back on this year for being a literal dream come true. 10-year-old Alysa would not even fathom that this was happening.
Yeah.
So definitely bittersweet, but I'm ready to see how it changes the next girl's life too.
That's awesome. So from the Quad Cities and then moved to the Metro. So you've been here for a while. Your title has kind of taken you all over the state. What is something that you've learned in your travels about Iowa that maybe you didn't know before or that maybe people that are from here wouldn't know?
Oh gosh. Well, I do think often people say Iowa is a flyover state, and I highly disagree. Every time I drive to a destination that's a little bit further out, maybe 2 hours, 3 hours away from here, I'm just amazed at how beautiful it is. I love seeing the cornfields. We do have hills. People say Iowa's really flat. We do have hills. I love seeing the hills of Western Iowa. It's beautiful. So in the wind turbines, those I think are uniquely beautiful, and Iowa has so many of them. So I think Iowa is a lot more beautiful than people give us credit for. And I have so many pictures of where I'll just pull over on a drive and take pictures of the landscape and the nature that we have. So that's something I guess I knew deep down, but I really got to see firsthand.
So you talked a little bit about toddlers and tiaras and your mom not wanting you to get into pageant world. So probably not the time to start calling you honey boo boo or anything like that, right?
I hope not.
Although that show was entertaining. Obviously, there have been shows and movies and stories and everything about the pageant world. What is a myth or a common misconception that you'd like to dispel about pageantry?
The 2 main things that I would say, the first one being that we are just show ponies, that we're just these beautiful women that have no substance. And it's funny because I've really noticed this throughout my year, is the first thing people will say to me is, oh my gosh, you're so beautiful. And while I personally never consider myself like the most beautiful in the room or never think of myself in that way, it's because I consider myself so much more than that.
Yeah.
And the cool thing about attending a pageant is you see that firsthand. But when you first meet a Miss Iowa or a Miss local title holder, etc., their first thought is always, you're so beautiful. There's so much more substance to me that I wish people realized when they were talking to us. We are intelligent women. We are driven. We are accomplished. I mean, some of the women I competed against were the most accomplished and kind and driven women I've ever met in my entire life. Our Miss America herself, I mean, she's getting a graduate degree from Harvard. She has her own nonprofit that fundraises hundreds of thousands of dollars for pancreatic cancer, and she's in the Air Force. So, I mean,
wow.
You can't tell me she's just beautiful,
Yeah.
right? We all are beautiful, but there's so much more to us. So that's a big misconception people have. The other one is that we are all very catty. So very similar to what my mom thought toddlers and tiaras would be.
Yes.
But one of our main pillars in our organization or our core values is sisterhood. And it's because we all are uplifting each other. It's really not a competition because you're competing against yourself. You're trying to better yourself in all these phases. You're trying to show what you have to offer. It's very similar to interviewing for a job because this is a job, right? The job is being a role model and serving the state. So if you're not chosen, it's not because you were less than another person. They just weren't looking for you at this point in time.
Yeah.
And all of the girls who compete realize that, and they're there to uplift each other. I mean, some of my very best friends I've made because of this organization, they'll be in my wedding party one day, and we already are planning reunions for my Miss America class to meet up in Arkansas or in Colorado or in LA. I mean, it's so cool to see how many lifelong friends you make from competing when so many people think it's the opposite. So that's something I wish people knew more about. It is a lot like Miss Congeniality in that way.
I like that. So you're not all competing with each other necessarily, but you're supporting each other and advocating for each other and having each other's backs. That's great. I loved what you said about being so much more than beautiful, which you are beautiful, but I know in the short amount of time that we have met that you are so much more than that. But I've learned some of my most favorite lessons recently from my 4-year-old, and with her little mantras and sometimes the things that come out of her mouth, I'm just like, I don't know where you ever heard that, but her thing right now in talking to herself is that I'm brave, smart, strong, and kind. And I love that nowhere in there does she ever talk about her looks or anything like that. She just, those core things about herself, I love. And I love that different lens and way of looking at things. So that's great. You mentioned you're so much more than beautiful. I would say it's probably a common thought that pageants primarily judge on your physical appearance and your personal appearance. How do you think that perception has evolved over time? And has it truly changed to go from a looks-based competition, or was that just how it seemed, or has it evolved in the time that you've been in the pageant space?
It's kind of a loaded question. There are a lot of pageant systems out there, and some are based primarily on beauty. And if that's what you want to participate in, go for it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with women realizing how beautiful they are. And it can be really empowering to be told how beautiful you are. Something with Miss America is it started as a bathing beauties competition of who looked best in the swimsuit and has transformed over time to the point where we don't even have swimsuit anymore, which I personally love. So it is a lot less on what your body looks like and more about who you are as a person and what you bring to the table. Our whole mantra is empowering women to lead, and that's in every aspect of their life. So it says nothing about empowering women to feel beautiful. It's about empowering you to continue succeeding in your life no matter what you look like. And I think that's kind of been a big change that society's starting to catch on to, because we want to feel inclusive for all women to feel beautiful because of the things that they've achieved and not because of the way they were born or how they look.
So there's been a lot of news recently around pageants, specifically with Miss USA and Miss Teen USA stepping down from their titles, citing mental health issues. Can you talk a little bit about how you perceive mental health support in the pageant community?
There's a lot more we could do. Unfortunately, this isn't the first time it's been talked about, because a few years ago, a former Miss USA, she was Miss USA 2019, Chesley Christ, took her own life. And it was very shocking and very sad for the pageant community, because she was someone that a lot of people looked up to. And from the outside, it looked like she had the perfect life. She was a beautiful woman. She had accomplished this dream of being Miss USA, which only a handful of people can ever say they've done. She competed at Miss Universe. She now had this job as a host on TV. All of these things that on the surface look amazing, but deep down, she was really struggling to the point where, she took her own life. And it was very sad to hear. So there's a lot more we could do. And in the wake of her death, there's been a lot more resources talked about, but I wish there was more implementation because this is a stressful job. There have been moments where my mental health has not been a priority, and I've had to make it my priority and really prioritize self-care and my own well-being, because it's a lot to feel like you are representing a whole state, or for some people, a whole country, where they're looking up to you. You're a role model for so many. One wrong move and you could be criticized or chastised or torn down in the comment section. So you have to be really careful when you're in this role, and that can lead to a lot of mental health issues. And as someone who has struggled with mental health, I really encourage people to dive deep into what they need and make their year their own, because we demand so much sometimes from people in these positions when really we need to remember that they're just human.
Yeah.
So my response to that is we still need more resources out there, and to remind people that it's okay to have breaks and to have days off, because we all deserve days off.
Yes, absolutely. That is so important, to take time to rest and recharge and get back into yourself. You mentioned earlier when we were chatting about just social media bullying. Lots of keyboard warriors out there that will hide behind a screen and have a lot to say. As a public figure who's kind of under the scrutiny of the public at all times, both, in person, but also an online presence, how have you protected your peace and kind of dealt with all of those comments and internet trolls?
Yeah. I'm fortunate that I haven't had very many throughout my year as Miss Iowa or anything, which is great.
Yes.
But there's still people who will comment mean things from time to time because they think Alysa is not Miss Iowa. They think it's just Miss Iowa. They tend to separate the person from the title, which has been a very interesting journey to navigate throughout this year as well. So a lot of times people will, meanlessly post something on a comment or on a video of me singing, for example, and say, this is terrible. And it doesn't ever feel good. But what I usually do is I either delete the comment or I simply ignore it, because one person's opinion should not define how I feel about myself, especially if it's someone who does not know who I am. And that usually tends to be the case. At the beginning of my year, I will say it was really challenging because I wanted to please everyone. I'm a people pleaser. I've always been a people pleaser. And again, this role is so challenging, knowing you have the weight of a whole state on your shoulders, really. You're representing everyone in Iowa, all 3 point some million of us. And I took that very seriously at the beginning. And it's not that I don't think it's important to realize now that I'm representing the state, but I'm just realizing now that my year is going to look different from someone else's year, and people can have their opinions on it. But I know I'm doing the best I can, and I'm preserving my peace by not checking the comments as often, by logging off when I need to, and journaling is a really big one for me.
That's great. Do you have a specific journaling system that you use, or are you just the traditional write down whatever comes to mind, or do you have like a guided?
I have to do pen and paper, and I just have a notebook because I've always struggled with anxiety. And something I had learned actually when I went through therapy, which I also highly encourage people to do, is I learned that my thoughts just get so jumbled up and they bounce around in my head. But when I can write them down, they all feel organized. And I'm a very type A person, so I love that too. So when I can organize them and actually put pen to paper, I sometimes realize how silly some of them are. And I realize kind of the solutions I can have to my own problems that I've created inside my head.
Yeah.
So journaling is a big one, or playing music. I studied music in college. I've loved it ever since I could talk, like I'd said earlier. So I always play music to just get the stress out too.
And when you're playing music, what instruments are you playing?
My main ones are piano and guitar, but I do play 8. So I also play like ukulele, bass. In band, I played oboe, clarinet, marimba. I'm trying to learn.
Marimba.
Yeah, marimba was fun, except when I had to roll it down the big football hill and 5th graders would try to help me and I had to move them out of the way so they wouldn't get run over because it was so heavy. I'm trying to learn right now accordion and banjo.
I love that.
We'll see how that goes. I don't know if I'm much of a banjo gal, but we'll see.
Okay, we're going to need a concert whenever you get the accordion and the banjo down. For your pageants, assuming singing is your talent. What's the song?
So it's different almost every year.
Okay.
Oh gosh, what have I sung? I love to sing musical theater for pageants because that seems to fit well with my voice. So this last year, I did a song called I'm a Star, which was a musical theater style piece. And I did that for both Miss Iowa and Miss America. At Miss Iowa, I won the vocal award. So I had the highest vocal score. So I figured I should just keep it for Miss America. Yeah. And I chose that song because the lyrics really reflect my journey through my time in this program. It's about overcoming the hardships that you face to achieve your dream and never giving up. And I felt like that was just perfect. So, and apparently the judges did too. So it worked out.
That is so perfect. Yeah. The only vocal score that I am getting is going to be in the shower, and it's going to be the lowest possible one.
We all sound better in the shower, myself included.
It's just the acoustics in there. They're just so much better. At least that's what I tell myself.
The shower or the car. I love to jam out in the car.
Me too. That is one of my favorite forms of just self-care, is honestly just turning up a song as loud as it will go and just belting it in the car, windows down. Like that is just,
yes.
I think Maren Morris said, that's my church. And yeah, I totally agree with that and get it. Going back to social media and protecting your peace and, ignoring the comments or deleting or whatever it may be. So today's youth, obviously, huge issue with social media. It's affecting their mental health. It's affecting their overall well-being. And it's not probably monitored as closely as it should be. If you were going to maybe give a piece of advice to one of the bullies, someone who is maybe making those comments on social media, what would you tell them? Like before you hit send or before you post that, consider this.
My main piece of advice, and this is something I would tell my middle schoolers. I used to teach middle school music.
Yeah.
I always told them to stop and think why they're saying this. What inside of you is hurting so much that you want to hurt another person? Because really, there's that quote, hurt people hurt people.
Absolutely.
And I do think it's true. In those moments when you're feeling hurt over something, or maybe you're jealous because you don't have something that someone else has, you, especially in the younger years, your first instinct is, fight or flight. You either try to run away from it or you try to attack it. So my advice is to really stop and think, why am I doing this? Why would I want to hurt another person? Because when you stop and reflect, you not only realize how wrong it is, but then maybe you can start your own journey of healing from whatever it is that's hurting you.
That's wonderful advice. Totally agree. We talked about your philanthropic work and using your platform with Miss Iowa to advocate for diabetes and research. Could you share some ways in which you've utilized that platform to advocate for those issues and kind of what that journey has looked like, kind of from, okay, I'm diagnosed. I know this is what I'm passionate about. This is what I want to advocate for, and kind of how that's evolved over time from start till now.
It's been so cool to see it transform. I really started small when I was first diagnosed because not only was I young, I was physically small, but I wanted to just dip my toe in it and see if it was something I really was passionate about, if I was even ready to advocate for this thing that I was just diagnosed with. And so I had reached out to the Juvenile Diabetes Research Foundation, who had actually visited me when I was in the hospital to give me resources that I could utilize when I was going through my first year, because that is typically the toughest when you're diagnosed. So I went to an event that they were hosting and I just saw what that community was like and fell in love with it. I felt seen for the first time since I was diagnosed. I felt like I found my community of people that really understood me and understood what me and my family were going through.
Yeah.
And so I'd reached out to them and I decided I wanted to volunteer for some of their events. And I volunteered at their annual walk in May. So it was almost a year after I was diagnosed, about 10 months, and volunteered. I sang the national anthem. And it's so cute looking back at little 12-year-old Alysa singing the anthem. I've sung it probably 100 times by now. So it's funny to see that journey as well, my musical journey. And after I volunteered at that first event, it just kind of opened doors for me to volunteer at more events with JDRF. And then I started hosting my own fundraisers because I had connections to, different local businesses, grocery stores that were willing to fundraise for me because I was a cute kid in a crown and I had this personal story that people could connect to or empathize with. And from there, I just felt empowered to reach out to other organizations. And so it slowly began building my network of people that I'd met at these events or connections that I've made that led to other connections. And now I can say I've partnered with more than 35 organizations from the regional level all the way up to internationally. I'm on a national council with JDRF now, which is very full circle. I was the only person on the Miss America stage who had diabetes and was advocating for diabetes, the first Miss Iowa to have diabetes and advocate for it. So all of these avenues that just kind of opened up because of one small action. So it really was a ripple effect that kind of took place over the past, 13 years now.
That's incredible. So being the first Miss Iowa to have type 1 diabetes and to share your story on the stage, have you had any sort of outreach or could you share maybe some impact that you've made on today's youth that might be going through the same thing?
Now, this might be where I cry.
Oh my goodness.
What was really cool was I think it was the day after I won, JDRF International posted my crowning moment picture and said they wanted to congratulate longtime volunteer Alysa for becoming Miss Iowa. And it was just flooded with so many comments of people that were so excited to see someone who had diabetes accomplish something that hadn't been accomplished before. And now I'm getting emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And some of the comments that I've received have just been so heartfelt and so amazing. Like one of them that always gets me, and now I'm crying. They had commented, "You make me feel okay with being a diabetic." And that was something that I needed when I was 11, when I was first diagnosed. It was something that little Alysa longed for, was to see someone who had accomplished something, because I didn't think I could ever do this one day, because it had never happened. So to hear other people resonate with that and finally see someone, whether it's in their state or not in their state, who has accomplished something like this is just, it's such an honor. And it's been the coolest part of my years to be able to represent them and know I'm doing it all for them.
That is so incredible. And I can see why that would make you emotional, just knowing that you're, impacting so many lives, not only with your platform and just the nature of, being Miss Iowa, but to be that person and that kind of beacon for hope for people who maybe felt like, I can't ever do this, to now think I can absolutely do that.
Right.
There's nothing holding me back. So I absolutely love those heartfelt messages and everything that you've received, like the outpouring and abundance of love, because you absolutely deserve it. And I think that Iowa is so honored and lucky to have you representing our state for so many reasons, but especially for what you're doing in that space. Aside from your diabetes advocacy, you're a mentor to women across the globe. Having this platform and having, the opportunities that you've had, what advice would you offer to, from young girls to women now that are aspiring to make a change, to make a positive impact and impact their community in a positive way?
Well, like Nike said, just do it. And do it scared. That's one of the quotes that has kind of stuck with me, especially when preparing for Miss America, because it's one thing to compete on a state level stage, but to compete on the national stage, I was scared out of my wits to do that. But if you just do it scared, you're not going to regret anything, because you at least did it. And if you wait until you're ready, that may never happen. So I would say do it even if you feel unprepared. Do it if you have no idea what you're doing, and do it if you're scared, because you could look back and regret never doing something. But if you at least tried it out, you'll at least look back with fond memories, and you can laugh at yourself, or you can say, I am so proud of myself for doing something new, for stepping out of my comfort zone. I don't think you'll ever regret it if you just go for it.
Absolutely. That's how we grow. If we don't do it, we're not having those growth opportunities. Here I am hosting my first podcast, and I was not prepared.
And you're killing it. You're killing it.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Just gotta, what is it? You gotta leap and find your wings on the way down, or whatever that saying is. So we're going for it. And I thank you for encouraging others to do the same. So Alysa, you have so much going on right now. You have your title of Miss Iowa. You're at your full-time job. You also are a podcast host as well. Would you like to tell us a little bit more about your podcast and the kind of things people could expect listening in on that?
Sure. I have a podcast called Not Your Type. So it's kind of a pun with type 1 diabetes, because I'm not the type of diabetic you might expect.
Yes.
Or you might have some misconceptions about diabetes. So I'm not the type that you would think I am. And on that podcast, I've interviewed many people from around the country, really, who are living with type 1 and doing incredible things, some including pharmacists, travel agents who are now taking trips with other people with diabetes across the world. Another fun one was an author of a type 1 diabetes children's book. One of my favorite episodes features Miss America 1999, Nicole Johnson, who was so far the first and only diabetic Miss America. So that was pretty amazing. And I also have solo episodes too, where I just talk a little bit more about tips and tricks or general information, sometimes some history lessons about what diabetes is and how it came to be. And I think it's worth a listen. So you should check it out anywhere you get your podcasts: Spotify, iHeartMusic, Apple Podcasts, Amazon, wherever you can find podcasts, you name it. That's where it is.
All right, everybody, not your type. Go check it out. And I love that because I love a pun. That is one of my favorite things. Your title time is coming to an end. You're about to pass the crown on. What's next?
Well, my full-time job that I just accepted a few weeks ago is at Iowa Diabetes. So even though I studied music education in college, I'm able to try a new career out with diabetes being a full-time gig, and I'm so excited about it. It was the job I was applying for when I was sitting at your table at the Healthy Estate Initiative. So I did get the job.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And I've started that already. And it has been tough to balance Miss Iowa and a full-time job because Miss Iowa really is also a full-time job. But it's kind of cool to see the overlap of all the diabetes work I've already been doing and how it has now impacted my role at Iowa Diabetes. So that'll definitely be more of a priority, obviously, when I'm done being Miss Iowa. And I'm excited to just see what is in store for me because this was one of the many dreams that I have, but it's not the only dream. So now I get to chase after others. And that's really exciting to think about.
Well, congratulations. I'm so excited that you got the job and they are so lucky to have you. I'm sure the work that you're going to do there is just going to be above and beyond everything else that you have already done. And I am thrilled for that community. So if you could give one final piece of advice, just in general, to anyone listening to today's podcast, what would that be?
Overall, to always choose kindness. That's kind of been an underlying theme, I think, of this episode, because you never know what someone else is going through. And ultimately, choosing kindness is an easy act that you can have every single day and will always make you feel better and will ultimately make the other person feel better. So always choose kindness and always choose to invest in yourself. That's something I've realized through my time in this program is that it's always worth it to do the things and choose opportunities that will make you grow, whether it's stepping out of your comfort zone, networking, being on stage and growing in your confidence and your communication skills, whatever it is that will ultimately better yourself is always worth it. So invest in yourself and always choose kindness.
What a great final piece of advice.
Well, thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found some inspiration in today's episode and perhaps feel compelled to go out into your own community and pay the positive vibes that you've experienced here forward. So be sure to connect with Alysa on social media to follow along on what's next for her in her journey. Check out her podcast, Not Your Type, like she mentioned, all the platforms that it's streaming on, and we will link everything as well. And with that, until next time, do good things. Thanks, Alysa.
Hey, we did it.